But from the frozen north came something even tougher. An awesome collection of brawlers who sounded like characters in a Western movie. Injun Joe and the Purple Gang. The Minnesota Vikings were a savage band who tore apart their opponents, en route to 12 straight victories, and were led by a gutsy quarterback, Injun Joe Cap. He was a leader not only in word, but in deed. And with guts more than ability, he led the Vikings to the Central Division title. In cold, frozen Minnesota, the Vikings and Rams met to decide the Western Conference Championship. And at first, Roman Gabriel seemed unaffected by the icy chill of the Minnesota winter. Gabriel drove the Rams as he had driven them all season, and his touchdown pass to number 87, Billy Truax, gave them a commanding 17-7 lead. But Joe Cap is toughest with the odds against him. He is a gambler. By air and by land, he led the Vikings in a come-from-behind effort. While Cap ignited the offense, a stubborn Viking front four ended any title hopes the Rams may have had and carried off the Western Conference title. Once again, the fire and fury of the Vikings had proven supreme, and the 23-20 victory gave Minnesota the chance to meet Cleveland for the NFL championship. The frozen tundra of Metropolitan Stadium was the setting for the 50th NFL championship between the Vikings and the Cleveland Browns. The two teams had met earlier in the season with the Vikings scorching the Browns 51-3. On this bitterly cold day, the only things that remained warm were Joe Cap's throwing arm and a grudging Viking defense that allowed Cleveland only one touchdown all afternoon. The powerful Viking front four pressured Nelson all day and finally ruined his throwing arm. The Browns were dead, and like a vulture, Joe Cap moved in to pick at their remains. The Vikings made their bid for their first NFL championship in dramatic fashion, as Gene Washington's incredible receptions moved the ball downfield. For Minnesota, it was a day when everything seemed to work. In typical Joe Cap style, a broken play became a touchdown. The Vikings made it look like a runaway as they piled up 24 points in the first half. The team that had waited 9 years for a championship became the first expansion team ever to win an NFL championship as they trampled the Browns 27-7. The only thing that stood between the Vikings and football immortality was a team from that other league. New Orleans, January 11th, 1970, the Super Bowl. As Kansas City's Len Dawson walked the field before the game, he reflected on what he had suffered to get there. He had suffered more injuries than a normal man could endure, but he also felt the pain of a forgotten man, 14 years before, Len Dawson had been a #1 draft choice in the NFL, but was rejected because they said he wasn't good enough. Now he was back to haunt them, and this was his revenge. He spoke for all those who had been rejected by the NFL. He spoke for Don Maynard, Ben Davidson, Jack Kemp, and others. But most of all, Len Dawson was a fitting symbol for the merger of the two leagues. He represents the determination and courage the AFL showed in its 10-year climb to football equality. And in 1970, that other league will no longer exist, as the National Football League will be a union of the greatest stars in the game. The world champion Super Chiefs, and what better way to start a new year than a replay of last year's Super Bowl? I have to ask you, Tom, who you're picking.
Well, I think Hank Stram sends the Chiefs into a ball game better prepared than any team in pro football, and I think Lenny Dawson knows what he can and can't do as well as any quarterback. I'm going to have to go with the Kansas City Chiefs until someone beats the champion. I think they're a great football team.
Minnesota's had a good preseason. Gary Quazzo's looked particularly good, and the Minnesota defense is always to be reckoned with.
It's always good, and they're stunning more than ever. And perhaps championships are won with defense rather than with offensive quarterbacks. But this is a classic battle, and of course, neither team will give an inch. And I guess there would be some revenge in store here, too.
I would think so. Let me just get it straight now. You're picking Kansas City?
I'm going with Kansas City. Now,
okay.
Pat, last year, and I don't want to bring this up, but I must, you picked Dallas to go all the way to the Super Bowl.
You had to bring it up, huh? I still think, Tom, that Dallas has got some of the great talent in this professional game. I think probably if you just go strictly on ability, that Dallas ranks right up with the best of them, Kansas City, Minnesota, whoever you might pick. They're a great football team. I don't know what's missing. But again, I think they're going to be good.